Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first special episode of the Alibi-ish podcast with your host.
Desi Madigan.
Yes, Miss Desi Madigan. Look at you in your purple. See, you guys can't see her. Well, you can once this come out on YouTube, but for all other streaming services, Desi is looking nice today. Okay,
Thank you. Feeling a little Barney-ish today, but
yeah,
it
and you got
goes.
you got to love that. You hear that? Like you heard how she gave the compliment right back. That shows you how bummy I look right now. So thank God you're not watching this on YouTube. But
No, you look great. You look great. So our introductory episode is that of Jennifer Dulos,
yes, Jennifer
mother of
Dulos.
five who went missing in Connecticut and had crazy twists and turns in
Yeah.
the story that had to do with her husband.
This was sort of your idea. To let you choose the first one. What made you want to do Jennifer Dulos as our first episode? Because this is the one everybody's going to remember, when they popped a little cherry and came out with their podcast.
It's just when you see the photo of her, just a photo
Mm-hmm.
of her to begin with, it's your introduction to her.
Yes.
She captivates you. She's a beautiful woman, and it's one of those cliche stories of a missing wife with a husband and an affair. I mean, I'm not, breaking any news here because a lot of these stories go
Yeah,
like
like
this.
that. Yeah. From other popular ones, I'm sure we're going to cover
Right.
coming up
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
So it's amazing, and it's very upscale, wealthy family, and just the aesthetics of it is just nice to look at. But the story is not a good one. It's a sad one. It's a tragic story because you have children involved. You have five children involved,
Wow.
and whenever there's kids involved, it really does pull at your heartstrings. So it's an interesting story, a sad one, and it's still kind of playing out with a few of the characters missing.
Yeah. And we care so much about these stories that's how we tell it. Not in the way you guys typically hear people talk, like we're talking back and forth. Actually, the story has already been done. So what you're hearing now is before the story. And we want to make sure that we deliver this in a very powerful way,
Right.
to show respect for the families that were all affected by this travesty.
Yeah. And so, to find us and pretty much anything we're going to cover is under our Alibi-ish social media. It's
Hmm.
Alibi-ish Twitter, on Instagram, Alibi-ish podcast page on Facebook. Am I missing anything?
And we even though Alibi-ish has a little dot in between it, just to look us up easier on all social media platforms and all streaming platforms from Apple to Spotify to however you listen to it, it's just ALBIISH. If you type in ALBIISH, you will find the streaming services uh, of your choice. And also our first big sponsor, as we have a partnership with you now. So thank you. We really appreciate you now. We're going to utilize that as a way that you guys can talk to us. So between weekly episodes that we put out, we will be going live on You Now, and that will also simultaneously stream to YouTube. But join You Now and make sure that you give us a big follow, because it was a really great opportunity for them to make us a partner from day one before we even do a podcast. So definitely appreciate that on You Now. And
I
you
love
find us on
that.
You Now too. Same name, ALBIISH.
I love that because I love that you're able to interact with
Yeah.
the people who are watching you because you get the feedback. Because if there's something that's not liked or something that, you're not sure of, they can just tell you right away. I love that.
Yeah, and they can come on too. So while we are streaming live on You Now, we can add them on and they can talk to us directly.
Awesome. And also, we have our own personal socials with
Hmm.
Desi Madigan for my Twitter and Instagram.
Same for me, at John Crimes on Twitter and on also Instagram as well too.
Awesome. So if there's anything else you want to add, then we'll just get into our introductory episode of the Jennifer Dulos case.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Fotis Dulos has always been a meticulous person, and for most of his life it's worked out in his favor, to say the least. I mean, we're talking about a multi-millionaire real estate developer, and it's also earned him a second beautiful home mansion in Jefferson Crossing. For all of the good things being meticulous has offered him in his life, it will be also the one thing that will ensure his demise this very day on January 28th of 2020. See, you can't just sit in your Chevy Suburban in your garage thinking about all the mistakes you've made in life that led you here. If you want this done and done correctly, you must put foam under the garage door. It will probably work to your favor if you were to duct tape a hose to your tailpipe, take that hose and move it to your driver's side window, rolling it up just enough to trap the hose inside of your vehicle. Also, if you want this done silently without alerting anyone, you probably want to remove your carbon monoxide detector. All meticulous things that Fotis Dulos did before going inside of his vehicle. As gas filled the room this very morning of January the 28th, Fotis would make 3 phone calls, first being at 9:53 a.m., this phone call going to his bondsman, or hoping to be his new bondsman, for his bond was revoked and he's trying to get Mr. Matazik of this new company to take on his new bail bond, and he wants it so badly he will call him twice. Not only at 9:53 a.m., but he will call back at 10:34 a.m. He wanted to let him know that he's headed to his lawyer's office and that everything is good and all set. Just 9 minutes later, at 10:45 a.m., Fotis would call his attorney, Kevin Smith, telling him to hurry and meet him at court, which he is due by noon. The final phone call will come at 10:59 a.m., calling his girlfriend, Anna Curry. See, that morning, Fotis told his girlfriend to drive to the bank to make a little withdrawal from his account, and it's been just enough time for her to return home, which he doesn't want her to do. Miss Curry is supposed to drive to this noon bond hearing with Fotis, so to keep her at bay, he tells her it's too late and he must leave the house right now to make it on time. So she should head to court as he follows her, and she did. She drove all the way to the court, and when she arrived, he was not there. And exactly at 11:34 a.m. of this morning, Anna would become concerned, thinking Fotis must have done something to harm himself. She was correct. Discrepancies of what was said between Anna and Fotis' lawyer, Anna saying such crazy claims about his lawyer, such as he told her not to call 911 for he fears bond may be denied or something worse, going as so far as to saying that Mr. Smith told her he may have cut his monitoring bracelet off. Nonetheless, by the time the police arrived at his home to see the smoke-filled garage, it was all but too late as Fotis was slumped over in his car. CPS began immediately with first responders, but he would never become conscious again. I wonder what could make a man end his life at the very last minutes of his life, affirming to those he deemed important of his urgent to be there to fight this. I wonder.
May 24th, 2019. As she heard the alarm sound to get up and begin what she undoubtedly thought would be a normal, routine day, Jennifer Dulos prepared her 5 children to be dropped off at school by 8 a.m. She was happy. She was finally living in a new home with full custody of her children in New Canaan, Connecticut. in a gorgeous 9,800 square foot, 6-bed, 9-bath house. A sprawling home that she was renting after she filed for divorce. That huge home was filled with happiness, if not with a slight smear of the fear Jennifer felt after filing for divorce and after separating from her husband of 13 years. That same home is where police would later discover bloody evidence that a violent crime had taken place, based on the stains and the spatter. Spatter that would spell out what investigators ultimately determined to be Jennifer's fate. She would describe some of this hesitation and anxiety that she felt in her marriage in a blog post in 2012. I wish I were a strong person, and that confrontation did not both scare and appall me. I think us as women, we feel that way most times. Perhaps we're built in a way where confrontation doesn't feel natural or nurturing. It could be an antiquated way of thinking, but for some, feeling that way, I think, is a struggle. At least for me it is. Jennifer was, by all intents and purposes, a very devoted mother. She would describe what parenting and motherhood meant to her in this blog. I love the bedtime routines, the rituals, the saying goodnights, the hugs, the kisses given, the songs sung. I just want to freeze the moment, snap a picture, take them all in. They grow up way too fast. It's no surprise she can write as well as she did, having earned a master's degree in writing from New York University. And her writings were usually filled with a mother's musings about the ordinary blessings of family life. That morning of May 24th was no different than any other. She had organized chaos of getting 5 kids under the age of 13 dressed and off to school. That was impressive in itself. But shortly after 8 a.m., that rhythm and that normalcy of Jennifer's life stopped forever. She was seen on surveillance video arriving at her home at 8:05 a.m., but she was never seen leaving. She never made that dentist appointment that she scheduled in New York City, and then later that doctor's appointment she scheduled in New York City. Lauren, her nanny, was baffled when she arrived at her home about 11:30 a.m. that morning and seeing that Jennifer's Range Rover was still in the driveway, but no Jennifer. But isn't it strange that around 10:25 a.m., security's cameras did show her SUV leaving her home? That wasn't Jennifer driving. Nobody picked up the children, so Lauren picked up the children. The children were then taken to the home of their maternal grandmother, Gloria Farber, in New York City, and by 7 o'clock that evening, full panic mode had set in, and she was reported missing. Nobody could get a hold of her, and she wasn't doing the one thing that consumed her identity, being a mother. I often wonder in cases like this, what goes through the minds of these poor children whose parents suddenly just vanish from their structure and daily routine that they're so accustomed to. It must be frightening. Needless to say, feeling of loss and maybe left without a compass. Which way to go? Suddenly mom is gone. As quickly as she disappeared, it became suddenly one of the largest scaled investigations to come to the Connecticut State Police. People just don't go missing in that part of the state. Later in the evening, there was sort of an ominous feeling that came over the investigation like this. The officers found Jennifer's abandoned SUV near Waveney Park, about 3.5 miles from her home. The tailgate was backed up against a tree, gear lever was stuck on reverse, no keys, not running, and on the passenger side of the vehicle, you could see the cleanup of the blood-like substance all over the passenger side under a flashlight. Immediately, a 300-acre search went across Waveney Park. In America, these seem to be the type of cases and missing persons that draw the most media attention, that captivate viewers as the opening story of the evening news. Think of it. A beautiful, wealthy mother of 5 from an exclusive and upscale town suddenly vanishes without a trace, and she's going through a divorce. The template of these stories kind of writes itself. The enormous and expansive search that was spanning multiple police departments, canines, the New York State Police helicopters, and the FBI, is in vast contrast to the promising life Jennifer Farber was meant to have. Jennifer Farber was born September 27, 1968. She was a deep-thinking and introverted New Yorker who grew up in wealth and privilege into a family who made a fortune in finance. Have you ever heard of the fashion brand Liz Claiborne? Her maternal aunt was that. She attended Brown University, and with her master's in writing, she was able to make a living being a stay-at-home mom while waiting for various outlets like Patch.com and writing her own blog. It was while attending Brown University that she met her future husband, Fotis Dulos.
Fotis Dulos was born in Turkey, but always proud to tell the story of how he was raised in Athens, Greece. See, by the time he went to his third country, here, the United States, in 1986, he was a proud, hard-working immigrant that made it on his own. But this all goes back to his college, prior to meeting Jennifer, where he was already married. And interesting enough, during the end of his marriages, he's exchanging emails with Jennifer. So much so that you guys are wondering, much like his wife at the time, was Fotis actually having an affair with Jennifer while he was married? Don't know those answers, but I do know that they were married just 1 month after his divorce. Interesting enough, because towards the end of his marriage with Jennifer Dulos to Michelle, you guys will hear about her soon enough, she had those same fears if he was having an affair with her. Nonetheless, he and Jennifer married. They had 2 sets of twins and also a little girl, making 5 lovely children. Something of interest, if I can segue, just 1 year before Jennifer would go missing. And do note that this is 1 year prior to Jennifer Dulos' disappearance, that Fotis Dulos will call photojournalist Michael Fiedler to his home while he's with his current girlfriend, Michelle Draconis, to be a part of this sort of GQ-ish magazine article. Basically, it's portraits of people and their life stories, called The Working Journal. More on Fotis' personality you can learn here from the photographer, who go on to say, luxurious. Everything was done perfectly. His office was immaculate. He was very well spoken. He seemed, key word being seemed, like a great guy. He'd also go on to say of Fotis and his girlfriend Michelle that they sat close at the table. They got along very well. I kind of felt like she was a really intricate part of what he was doing with his career. Successful dreams and careers. The photojournalist Michael Fiedler would go on to say during this photo session, as he took numerous amounts of black and white photos of Fotis and his girlfriend Michelle, Fotis would say he loves the American dream. He loves being a builder. He loved growing up in Athens, Greece with his father, and he loves his 5 children. Guys, if you let someone talk long enough, you'll sometimes find out what they truly covet in life. And as he say these things over again, this is what he truly covets. He covets his success. He covets his family and growing up in Greece. Later on, I'll tell you why I only say the word sometimes covet instead of all the time coveting. But before we get on to that, let's go back in time to the breakdown of his marriage with Jennifer.
Some of these stories sometimes go. The marriage gradually broke down, with the couple spending as much as 10 days a month apart, as the real estate developer would chase the latest water skiing competition and chase his girlfriend, Michelle Draconis, whom he met on one of his travels with his kids to Miami at a ski club. Michelle, the ESPN reporter from Venezuela, and much to Fotis' liking, a competitive skier, like himself. She sure was a sore topic for Jennifer. So much so that when she filed for divorce from Fotis, one of the court orders stated Michelle was to stay away from the children. He broke that order numerous times. Jennifer had had enough. Her husband was having an affair that he wasn't even trying to hide when confronted. He admitted he was in love with her. Michelle's family tells of a love story that she believes she was living, having met a charming man who was family-oriented and athletic like her. That love story would turn out to be an awful mistake in her life. Jennifer Dulos filed for divorce on June 20th, 2017. That was the same month she moved into that big, beautiful home in New Canaan. And Michelle moved right into her old house in Farmington with her young daughter. And in her filing, you could feel the fear and the tension that she felt in doing so. That was caused by her husband. I know that filing for divorce and filing this motion will enrage him. I know he will retaliate by trying to harm me in some way. I am afraid that my husband will harm our children to punish me. He is dangerous and ruthless when he believes he's being wronged. He must always win at all costs. Fotis was not a man who liked to lose. Jennifer also pointed out that he had recently bought a gun that year. Fotis denied making any threats to Jennifer and claimed that the gun he had was for home security. So months went by with both parents filing motions claiming that the other was disparaging them back and forth. And an emergency request was granted in March of 2018 after the judge found that Fotis had indeed broken the orders that were previously in place, and sole custody was awarded to Jennifer. All of this tension, betrayal, heartache, and animosity, it kind of set the backdrop for what was to be May 24th, 2019, when Jennifer dropped off her kids and was never seen again. As friends, family, and law enforcement spent hours and days searching for Jennifer, there was one person not so interested in doing so, her now estranged husband, Fotis Dulos. After reviewing all the evidence of blood traces, abandoned vehicles, and the picture of violence that had emerged, Connecticut's Chief State's Attorney, Richard Colangelo Jr., took on the case, and Fotis immediately rose to the top of the list of suspects for him. When he was asked to be interviewed at the New Canaan Police Department, Fotis refused, and he was already accompanied by a civil attorney who immediately was calling a criminal defense attorney. Weird when all she was missing, right? While at the police station, Fotis made an unusual decision that perhaps he immediately regretted. He handed over his cell phone to the detectives, and after a search warrant was granted, they were off with the data that was discovered on that phone. Fotis' phone indicated that he was on Albany Avenue around 7 p.m. the same night Jennifer went missing and around the same time that she was reported missing. And when the Hartford police downloaded the treasure trove of video surveillance, they could not believe their eyes. He was seen driving around and throwing out black garbage bags and other items in as many as 30 locations and receptacles. And in the passenger seat of the truck he was driving, a female that was leaning out of the door, also disposing of items. Immediately, police retrieved some of the items that were thrown out or disposed of, and when you hear of the items, it gives you chills to think of what could have occurred to Jennifer. They found used zip ties with human blood and Jennifer's DNA, female undergarments, and a vineyard vine shirt in Jennifer's size. They found 2 ponchos with large amounts of Jennifer's DNA and blood. After that, the investigation shifted. June 1st, 8 days after Jennifer vanished, Fotis Dulos and Michelle Troconis were arrested for tampering with or fabricating physical evidence and first-degree hindering prosecution. They couldn't quite charge them with murder, as Fotis's phone only showed that he was at home when Jennifer disappeared. So, according to his phone, and Michelle, who told police that Fotis was in Farmington that morning, making love and showering with her.
Sounds so alibi-ish.
They were both released on bond, $500,000 each, and ordered to wear ankle monitors. In the days that followed their arrest and release, the press would find Fotis jogging, shopping, normal things you do when the mother of your 5 kids is missing and the world thinks you harmed her. Michelle, through her lawyers, holds steady to the claim that she's innocent and was lied to by Fotis and completely unaware of the trip that they were taking to Albany Avenue.
This is when Michelle would go on to say,
I can walk you through the whole world if you want. I can do whatever you want, but I have no idea what happened to Jennifer. I don't know where Jennifer is. Hard to believe her, as she eventually changed her story, and the alibi of showering and being intimate was not true. She lied to police. She changed her story 2 or 3 times. Fotis's attorney, Norm Pattis, would hold multiple conferences in front of cameras where he would challenge the state's case, as there was still no body, no proof that she was even dead. He even went as far as contemplating a Gone Girl theory, Gone Girl being the movie starring Ben Affleck, in which a revenge suicide is the explanation for the wife's disappearance, just to frame the poor husband, and in this case, framing poor Fotis. But bit by bit, the state did build their case, and it went like this. In the pre-dawn hours of May 24th, and with an old red Tacoma truck, a truck that belonged to one of Fotis's employees, Fotis took this truck without permission from one of his properties that he owned at 80 Mountain Spring Road around 5:35 a.m. He drove it to New Canaan. The truck was eventually tracked and found near Waveney Park on a country road, same road where Jennifer's SUV was eventually found. Investigators believe that Fotis brought a bicycle with him in this truck and rode it the 3 miles to Jennifer's house. He waited for her to come back from school drop-off, and when she entered the garage, that's when the violent attack occurs. No, wait. Someone who hadn't been to Jennifer's house, it's curious that they did find Fotis's DNA on the doorknob and a mixture of his and Jennifer's DNA on a faucet. They believe that he spent a couple of hours cleaning up, and he put her unconscious body in the back of her SUV and drove off. After abandoning the SUV, and no doubt in a panic state as there were cars going back and forth on this country road, he transferred her body onto the Tacoma, and it's unknown what was done with her. What is known is that he then arrives back to the property about 12:22, where he and Michelle spent much of the afternoon cleaning it, and for what Michelle claims was to show the property to a client. 5 days later, they both took that red Tacoma truck to the car wash and the detail shop, and left that 20-year-old truck in immaculate condition. As one of the police officers is quoted as saying, "You could eat off the floor of that truck." In an unusual request, though, Fotis asked the employee who owned that truck to have the seats taken out and get rid of them. But the employee kept them and handed them over to police. On the passenger side of the seats was a blood-like stain. And of course, after it was tested, it was proven to be Jennifer's DNA. As months went by and additional arrests and charges were filed against the two, Michelle and Fotis ended up living separately. Michelle in her own apartment, Fotis in his own house. But Fotis was not without companionship nor help from a woman. In January 2020, Anna Curry was the new woman in Fotis Dulos' life. She was his new girlfriend. A native of North Carolina and graduate of Duke University, she met Fotis at a finance firm, and she was the one who signed a $3 million assurance note to ensure Dulos' bond money. She paid $147,000 in cash to assist Fotis and committed to continuing payments. But Michelle isn't the only one facing trial or charges in this case. Fotis' friend and one-time lawyer, Kent Mulvaney, is also charged with conspiracy. He was at Fotis' house the morning that Jennifer went missing, and he was vague and quite elusive with police when he was questioned. After spending 9 months in jail, he turned state evidence and plans to implicate Michelle, as both have pled not guilty. Jennifer Dulos' body has never been found, and the children are being raised by their maternal grandmother in New York City. As of this recording, Michelle is still fighting and currently requesting documentation from the Dulos divorce, from Attorney Mulvaney's arrest on sexual assault charges involving his estranged wife, and several cell phone records from everyone involved. So many of these tragic stories are so avoidable and unnecessary, and we're always just left asking time and time again, why not get a divorce? Do I think Fotis killed his wife? All signs point to yes. But if we can appreciate anything, it would be Jennifer's own parting words that she left for her children in her blog. Breathe. Be alive, enjoy life, healthy, calm, joyful, and at peace.
And now we've reached the end of the story, but as we'll do on this first episode and many, many more episodes to come, right at the end, I'll talk directly to the killer in this case. But before we can do that, I'd like to ask you all for a round of applause. Two reasons. A little louder. There you go. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Firstly, that round of applause was for another coward that was arrested today for first-degree murdering of his wife by the name of Barry Morphew. Secondly, the round of applause is for the acting ability of you, Mr. Fotis. You see, let's get into your suicide note that you wrote prior to sitting into your car, inhaling fumes, hoping your life go away, just to leave. I'll come back to that. But I want to read your own words and see can everyone else understand what I understood when I read your suicide note. Or shall I say, your selfish note. You go on to write, if you're reading this, I am no more. I refuse to spend even an hour more in jail for something I had nothing to do with. Enough is enough. Oh, you poor baby Fotis. You go on to say, if it takes my head to end this, so be it. I want it to be known that Michelle Troconis had nothing to do with Jennifer's disappearance, and neither did Kent I asked the state to let them free of any such accusations. I also asked the state to stop harassing my friends. Andrell and Anna Curry, they are honorable people. Please let my children know that I love them. I would do anything to be with them, but unfortunately, we all have our limits. The state will not rest until I rot in jail. My attorney can explain what happened with the bag on Albany Avenue. Everything else is a story fabricated by law enforcement. I want to thank my family and friends that stood by this difficult time. Above all, Anna Curry, I am sorry for letting you down and not continuing the fight. End of suicide, or shall I say selfish note. You guys remember earlier in the story when I say sometimes it can show what you covet in life, but only sometime. Because earlier he stated he cared about growing up in Greece with his father. He cared about being a successful businessman, and he cared about his 5 children. That sometimes comes now. For he didn't mention his children until he got to the center of his suicide paragraph. He also said, above all. And while he didn't capitalize any letters except for the beginning of sentences, he capitalized above all, Anna Curry, who was his current girlfriend after he left the girlfriend prior to her, taking the rap for this murder, and the wife before her in the ground. You know what you won't know, Fotis? You won't know what a child that goes through losing a parent to a murder. You won't know how they feel. You won't know how they feel when they go to school being attacked by so many other children for having a father as a murderer. You don't care. All you cared about was yourself. I'm staring at your suicide note as I speak, and all I see littered throughout this note is I. You say I on 90% of the lines inside of your suicide note. 90% of the lines you say the word or letter I. But I guess I shouldn't be so mad, because you say I looking at yourself. When I look at you, I say you. So your I and my you are the same person. So here goes. You are a murderer. You are a coward that couldn't go through everything all men across the world go through when a relationship doesn't work, called a divorce. You couldn't stomach it when times get hard, and it contradicts what you covet in life. You covet the American dream, hard work, starting from the ground up and building what you have, for you've only destroyed it. Or I hope you haven't destroyed it. I hope these children take the money that you left behind to have really good counseling, for they will need it for the hard life you, Fotis, has given them for their future. Fotis, I feel sorry for your family and friends that you said you only let down. You didn't let down. You destroyed them. You destroyed so many lives and so many families from a selfish act from a coward. That will be your legacy, not moving from Athens, Greece. To everyone else, Desi and I will see you all next time. And until then, make sure you check us out as we go live on YouNow before our next story.